Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think can be kind of a helpful starting point in this is, okay, well, how do we get traction? Like, how do we get this thing moving? And I really do think that like one of the connective tissues around this is that piece of experiences, right? That overlap. So it's not just awkwardly, okay, let me just tell you how you should do something, right? But it's that like overlap of lived experience doing something together. So I'm just curious, kind of for you guys, have you had that kind of experience either, as a sage investing in someone where you kind of brought them along, or on the other side where, as a younger guy, you're going, okay, well, I'm gonna ask them into this space to kind of help move me around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I've had this philosophy for a very long time of just like never do any project alone. Like we were joking around about before this video of my daughter Whitney had to move, and it's always helpful to have another pair of hands. But I also was like, man, it's gonna be all the drive time, all the hang time, and so I was like, Alex, what are you up to, man? You want to go with? And dude's crazy enough to clear 2 days, which is a huge gift.
Yeah.
But 2 days, 2.5 days together, we had so many meaningful conversations. Like I learned so much more about his family, for example, and their history and their story, which you can't get when you just go get a coffee, or just have a cigar, for an hour, because we're literally in the car for whatever it was, 15 hours, and you can just keep asking, like, tell me more about that, and having that much context on someone you love is really profound. It's like something going from 2D to 3D. And when you're doing, when you're doing something physical, shoulder to shoulder, too, it drops something. Like something drops in terms of our guard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%. But you had to be intentional about making that invite, because you could have talked yourself out. Alex isn't going to want to go with me.
But one of the guys who was a mentor in my life, Mark Beeson, like when I was 21 or 22, that was something I remember him saying to me. He's like, never do anything alone. Like any project that you do, like even if you're going to go to the store, it's going to take you like 30 minutes, like invite a student to go with you. And I started doing that when I was 21. It's like, if you can, take someone with you, man.
The first pastor I ever, I was like 19, I was youth pastor, going to Bible college, and Sam asked me to come on staff, and he would do that all the time. And he would be like, he'd call me up, like, hey, what are you doing this afternoon? I'm like, oh no, he's going to want me to dig a ditch or something. It was like, and he would go, well, hey, I'm going to run down. He had mentioned some older couple in our church that maybe she had fallen and broken her hip or whatever. And he goes, I'm going to go down to a Kroger and get some groceries, and we're going to go over to the Jones' house. You want to go with me? And I learned how to be a pastor by just being with Sam on that kind of stuff all the time, But just going to and back, and just the little serendipitous conversations that we'd have, just the wisdom of life and all that. I looked forward to it, man. I looked forward to it. It's like, this is rich.
Yeah.
Where am I going to get this?
It's all the along the way stuff.
It is.
It's
along the way.
It's how Jesus did his ministry.
It was.
And there's this like wax on, wax off thing with, Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, yeah.
Where you don't realize you're being taught something along the way. I think back to when I was in my early 20s, I had a mentor. His nickname was Toby. So his real name's Nathan Davenport. Toby, that was his nickname. And same thing. He was just always inviting me along the way when he was going to get groceries. He was like, 8 years older than me. And from my vantage point, here's a guy who was married, had kids. Right.
Well, you're a real man.
Hey, I'm going to the grocery store, and those, like, all of those little different moments, but I'd be tagging along and I would see how he's interacting with his wife, how he's interacting with his store. And it's this like wax on, wax off. He's not saying, hey, Josh,
watch this.
Right. But it's just the like, as we're going, Mr. Miyagi-ing me.
Yeah.
And then, I remember 10 years later, he lives down in Dallas. We're sitting in his living room and we're talking about some stuff. And it like a light bulb came on where I was like, oh my, he was Mr. Miyagi in me this whole time. I'm doing stuff in my marriage now because of how he did it. But he never said, Josh, this is what you should do.
Right.
He just was modeling, showing me in those everyday little spaces. And then when I got to the place where I needed it, it was there. It was like embedded into my brain already.
That's the stuff.
Yeah.
No. It's almost like even the smallest of adventures, there's still like a mini dragon to be slain.
Always, man.
Like there's like a problem that comes up and it like breaks you out of like your idea of like, here's Rob and I's relationship. And well, actually, now we got to figure out how to get a couch in this house. Dragon. Look at that handle right there. What are you doing with that handle? There we have the tools, and we still not put together a bed frame. What in the world is that? Like, it completely rearranges. It's like a new quest almost.
Yeah.
You know, and it builds depths, like you said, go from 2D to 3D.
Yeah.
And it creates a rounded form of. In that moment, I don't feel like I need to make Rob proud with my entire life.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, we're like a lot of times in a mentor-mentee relationship. Because they put so much time into me, I better be successful. But the only thing I need to do there is figure out how to use a screwdriver. You know, I need to find the bananas, you know, at the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it humanizes each other.
Yeah. 100%.
Like even the smallest of problems. Can break that weird wall we put up between each other.
Yeah, it's, and you made me think too, it is, there's an impartation that happens that is profound. The what was the name of your guy?
Toady.
Yeah. One of my guys, his name was Brad, and he was a piece of work. He used to sell drugs. He was a deadhead for a while. He followed the Grateful Dead around. And then he met Jesus, and he became a Jesus head. He was so in love with Jesus, so passionate about Jesus. And he was in his mid-20s, and I had just met Jesus, and he just opened his life to me. You know, and he would pick me up early on Friday. He was a plumber. And we'd go to the bowling alley in South Holland, and we'd buy breakfast. And we'd just sit and talk about Jesus, and we'd get the 2, 2, and 2. It was like 2 pancakes, 2 eggs, 2 sausage. And the first time we met, he like chopped everything up, you know, poured syrup. And I was like, I'm not chopping it. Don't do it. Right, you know, and I would just whatever Brad did. We went, you know, jogging in the park. And man, he started literally, when we were jogging, he started praying out loud and raising his hands. I was like, whoa. Like, that's how much you love Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I've never seen anyone who just, I remember the first time I prayed with him. I had grown up in church, I'd prayed 100,000 times, but he started praying and I felt the presence of God. And there was this intimacy and authority. I remember thinking in my head, I don't know if I've ever even prayed. And so much of who I am today, I feel like he just somehow imparted to me. He never actually just was like, now here's how you pray.
Right.
Or, you know, it was just Brad being Brad.
Yeah.
And just taking me on the ride. And making his life open to me. And
do you guys sense, I mean, that's the stuff.
Yep.
Do you guys sense that we've lost that today? I mean, it was almost normative more back in the day. And it was very serendipitous. It was, hey, I mean, you didn't, okay, this is a mentor and mentoree covenant, you know, that you and Brad signed. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. Do you think that we've lost that, the more intentionality of this today, or the expectation for these kind of relationships to happen?
I would say it definitely feels fractured. For sure. I mean, I think part of it is the way that technology has kind of eroded how some of those things naturally happen, right? You know, so I mentioned, you know, Tony Brino wanted me to go buy groceries. Our groceries, we ordered their Target pickup. Which,
Or either DoorDash it, and it's just something small.
So there's just like little aspects that I think have gotten kind of willed away that we don't realize what removing all those different aspects kind of do.
Yeah, it's true.
And then I think the other thing too is the way that the phone physically creates a barrier. You know, when I was talking about that, I didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
You did have a phone with Brad, and there is something about that phone that starts to create this barrier that I think does two things. I think one is there's this distraction in real time. You know, if you're sitting there and your phone's going off, I think the person sitting across from them, it kind of feels like that you're pushing them a little bit away. And I had a guy, oh man, maybe 10 years ago, right? Older guy, probably 25 years older than me, say, hey, can I give you a piece of advice? Just friendly wisdom. When someone takes you out to eat, put your phone away and don't look at it until the meal's done.
Yeah.
And I needed someone to just tell me that truth. No one, you know, at that point, I probably had an iPhone for 10 years. And it had just become like ubiquitous. I'm sitting there, my phone goes off. Oh, I got a text from someone. Oh, someone posted on Twitter. I'm retweeting it, right? And for him just to like, and not in like a mean spirit way, it was just this like real like fatherly thing where he's like, hey, this will go far. And I've taken that to heart in the last like 10 years where I'm trying to get, if I'm getting together with someone, putting that away and trying to invite other younger guys to follow that same thing. Hey, like, what if we just put our phones aside?
Yeah.
And that opens up a richness of dialogue that I think a lot of times gets missed if you don't name that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's even a spiritual discipline. You know, to do that. That's the rule. And we don't, in our household, we don't have a lot of rules, okay? But that is a rule that Sherry and I have is no phones at the table. You know, it's like, nope, you're not allowed to do that because we lose.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you look, in fact, I noticed it last night. I was at dinner last night, and I remember it just caught my attention. There was a couple of guys that were at a table across from my table, and then literally both almost during the whole time of dinner, they were both on their phone. And they're not even looking at their food.
Yeah, it's sad, man. I see that too.
It's terrible.
In restaurants, like family sitting there, everyone's looking at their
Everybody's
phones,
on their phone.
each other.
It's like being on, everybody came to be alone together.
Yep.
You know,
I think another dynamic too, and I know everybody at this table were more into like simple expressions of the church, but I got to be honest, you know, Brad and I were in like a small to mid-sized church. There was 200-300 people, so everybody knew each other. So there was a proximity thing that would happen, you know. And I do have to say, like with the church growth movement and attractional forms of church, I think it did make it more difficult to have that sort of more organic, natural sort of mentoring relationships to happen. It became much more, and I led in that form of church for many, many years because we felt so much responsibility to create these systems. You know, so now it's my job as the church leader to assimilate people into groups, you know, and then to tell you what to do with these groups. And then we've got these weekend services. We got to cycle people in and out. There aren't very many like soft spaces, and then it's so large that people are mostly strangers. And I think that small to mid-sized church, or like what we're doing with micro churches, it facilitates those more natural discipling relationships. Versus like a large church. Where you can be anonymous. And even that was one of the principles of church growth. Like create a church experience where people can be anonymous.
Right.
Well, and not even just the systems, but the segmentation that we've done.
Right.
Like I think, and you see that even now in the small and medium-sized churches, right? That when we were growing up wasn't as much there, right? So it's like, oh, we've got our senior ministry, we've got our young adult ministry, we've got our youth, kids, and everybody all siloed. They get all siloed out. And the church that I grew up in, there wasn't a senior ministry. The senior ministry was integrated right into the youth ministry. Like those people were the ones who volunteered with the student ministry. It wasn't a bunch of 24-year-old young adults that were showing up at our student ministry. It was Don Eccles, who was a grandfather, who showed up and volunteered inside of the youth ministry, right? And so there was those kinds of like overlap that even now, sometimes in some of those smaller spaces has still gotten kind of broken up. And then there isn't as much of those overlap. And I think I lost something in not having the integration of those,
No,
those
100%.
spaces.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was starting when you were 10, you went to, big church at our church. But prior to that, you would be, they had a Sunday school for the kids. And I remember sitting through service and with all the generations. And I look back on that now with such fondness.
I have for the last several months, I've been doing, for lack of better terms, it's a consulting and coaching with the church that's in a transition spot. And it's been such a throwback. It's this little country church out in the middle of Missouri, central Missouri. And this church had been there over 100 years old. I met multiple people in their 80s that have their baptismal certificate from when they were children, being baptized in that church. And everybody's together. And I remember like the first Sunday I was there. So I go in about once a month and I speak, and then I meet with their board and everything and all this transition stuff afterwards. But like the first Sunday, they're all there. And there's babies, making noise, and they're wooden pews, and so everything's bangy and noisy and everything. And I had watched like a couple of YouTubes, kind of, I want to get a feel for what to expect. And I could hear it all over the YouTube, the episode that I watched, and I was like, oh, I'm so ADD. I don't know if I'll be able to even get through a message. And I've been there several months now doing this. It's been amazing. It's been glorious. It's been like what you were saying. It's been like, this is so sweet. I haven't gotten distracted. They've got 2-year-olds with 90-year-olds all in the same service. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's our micro church has had from babies on up to early 80s.
Yeah.
All in our micro church, and we love it. And sometimes it's totally chaotic.
Sure.
And I think you have some micros like that too.
And I bet you for you guys,
I love the multi-generational part of it.
But I bet you for you guys that lead micro church, that you get the question all the time from guys that are thinking about like, what did you do with the children?
Right.
It's always like, and you're like, well,
we're family.
Then we're family.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you do with your kids today?
Exactly. Exactly. So, but that we want everything to be perfect or whatever. Now, I was thinking as you were talking about, and I know that we're not knocking on, because we've got so many relationships and good experiences, and to this day, we've got relationships with friends that lead the larger form church. But I was talking just last week, I was talking to a pastor friend. He's a really large church, and he was talking about COVID. And he said, man, we probably half the people didn't come back after COVID. And he said, I just think they found out it was a lot, pajama church was a lot more convenient, because for them, they had not connected. Maybe they'd been in church for 5 years, but they had not connected. They were just showing up for the worship, for the sermon or whatever. So it was like that inconvenience and all that. We're not losing anything if we just sit here and watch it online.
Yeah. And
they had not connected with the dynamic of the depth of community, like what we're talking about, the texture of that that's so ethereal. You can't monetize that, and you can't explain it without experiencing it. And some people have grown up in those type of church systems they've never experienced, so they don't even know what they're missing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
When you're saying that, I'm thinking like all the times I've been a church leader, I'm like, I can't believe they just sit at home, church at home, and like they're not really experiencing a church here. You're saying that, I'm feeling this like deep well, like they weren't experiencing church here.
Yeah.
Like they weren't building meaningful relationships. They weren't being able to like ask the hard questions. with people who have walked a couple steps in front of them.
Yeah. So true.
And so I wonder if it's not there, where do we find it? And that's what I'm hearing when you talk about like we're isolating ministries and churches. It's harder right now in the church to find real, like, valuable mentor-mentee relationships. Church attendance is declining at large anyway. If we can't find it there, it kind of feels like it's culturally been the hub for those kinds of relationships. These kinds of relationships.
Yeah.
That is the original design for the church.
Where do we find it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we've redesigned it to make it very difficult to find,
Yeah.
that's our problem.
Right. So you're saying what you're talking about is not a new thing.
No.
It's not a new thing.
No.
Yeah, it's a very old word. But it's always interesting to me that everybody will talk. But usually it's people that reach back and bring back an old thing are called radicals.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, and so I'm old enough, I'm sorry to say, I'm old enough to remember back in the 70s, and especially in the late 60s and 70s, the Flower Children, you know, the Woodstock and all that. And a lot of them really were going into organics and they start these little communes of organic farming and Mother Earth News and all this stuff. And they were called radicals, but they were just going back to stuff that even to this day, there's a lot of cultures still operate that way. But the word radical and the word root come from the same root word. That's what radish is, a root. It's radical. So it usually is the ones that get labeled as radicals were actually the ones that have gone back to the original. They're not starting anything new. And that's what we're kind of talking about here. So, hey, good convo, guys. We got to wrap this one up. We'll have some more.